An early Shabbat Shalom, friends, from Congregation Bet Tefillah here in beautiful Scottsdale, Arizona. So you may have heard of the story of these two beggars who stood outside a church on a Sunday morning. One was wearing a big Star of David, and the other beggar was wearing a big cross. As the worshippers started to come out, they were naturally, almost instinctively drawn to giving charity to the man wearing the cross, the symbol of their faith, not the man wearing the Star of David. At one point, one of the worshippers approaches the beggar with the Star of David, and he says to him, "I don't understand you. No one's giving you charity. Just leave and go home. There's nothing for you to do here. Your Star of David does not represent our faith." And at this point, the man with the Star of David shouts out to the beggar with the cross, and he says to him, "Hey, Yitzchak, look at this guy. He's trying to teach us how to raise money." But friends, I'm reminded of this story because in this week's portion, in the portion of Shelach, we also speak of a story in which people were sent camouflaged. Who? The 12 spies who were sent by Moses to explore the land of Israel just before the nation's entry into the promised land. Unfortunately, 10 of the 12 spies came back with negative reports that not only infused our nation with negativity, but infused them with fear towards the unknown, towards that ultimate entry into the land of Israel, the land that was promised to them by God. Two of the 12 spies, Yehoshua and Caleb, fortunately remain optimistic and faithful in God's promise and the ability of the nation of Israel to inherit the land. Now, I'd like to juxtapose this story that I encourage you to continue to explore in your own way this coming Shabbat in this portion of Shelach. I'd like to juxtapose again the story of the 12 spies that failed with the mission of bringing hope and bringing a promise to their nation with the story in the Haftarah of this week's portion. The Haftarah of this week's portion includes a story that occurred 40 years later, just before the nation of Israel's new leader, Joshua, was about to enter the land of Israel. He too decided to send spies to explore this land. He sent 2 spies, and lo and behold, they came back positively, optimistically, and they told Joshua, yes, God has given us this entire land for us to inhabit and inherit. The question, though, to you, my friends, today is, what happened that one mission failed and the other mission succeeded? Why did the 12 spies that Moses, the greatest leader perhaps of all times, sent, failed, while Joshua, who was maybe less of a leader than Moses, yet certainly a very high and supreme leader and holy one, but how come his mission did succeed? And the answer, my friends, I think speaks to one of the great truths of life. And it is included in just one word that is stated at the onset of this mission by Joshua, of those 2 spies who did come back with a successful and optimistic report. What word? What secret? I'm quoting from Joshua, chapter 2, verse 1. Again, this is read in this week's Haftarah. Vayishlach Yehoshua bin Nun min Hashitim, Shnayim Anashim Meraglim, Cheresh Lemor, which means Joshua, son of Nun, sent 2 men from Shittim as spies, Cheresh, saying, and then he goes on to instruct them what to do. But I'd like to focus on that word, Cheresh, which I haven't yet translated. What does this mean, Cheresh? What Cheresh means in Hebrew is deaf. He instructed them to be deaf as they explore the land of Israel. Why be deaf? Why act as deaf? So there are commentaries that explain that if they do act deaf, then they'll be dismissed by the people of the land. They won't think of them as spies that will say, oh, these people are just deaf, let's leave them alone. But Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Raditchev, one of the great Hasidic masters, takes this a step further. And he says to us that what Joshua was telling these spies is something that he was telling each and every one of us on how to live a life that is purposeful and meaningful. he says to us that sometimes we too have to be deaf. You see, before we are about to take upon ourselves another project that will elevate our lives, before we are about to take upon ourselves, say, a mitzvah that will empower our lives, before we are about to move on into a promising and yes, positive future, sometimes we will have doubt, insecurity, and fear threaten us and threaten our movement. Sometimes you will have naysayers and people of negativity that will come to you and say, you can't do it. It's impossible for you to achieve this or that dream. Towards that, we too ought to be deaf. We too ought to act cheresh, as Joshua was telling his spies to do. And indeed, they acted deaf towards all of the negativities of the world. And they came back successfully, exclaiming to Joshua, again quoting, Ki natan Hashem biyadeinu et kol haaretz, v'gam namogu kolesh ve'haaretz mipaneinu, translating, for the Lord has given us the entire land into our hands, and also all the inhabitants of the land have melted before us. Friends, what a powerful lesson, especially in our day and age, in this coronavirus era, and during these social upheavals that we are sadly experiencing all across the United States of America. Often we ask ourselves, what will be? Often we say to ourselves, well, our world has changed and not for the better. Often we look at ourselves in the mirror and we say to ourselves, well, gosh, we've lost so much. How can we regain our strength? How can we regain our optimism? To all of these questions, there is one answer. Cheresh, act deaf. Turn a deaf ear to all of those voices. Focus inward. Look at your divine soul. Listen to its infinite potential. And know that nothing for you is impossible, because you have God on your side that will be leading you, if you act deaf, to your own promised land. Friends, I don't have to tell you, the stories are known. But in history, many greats have faced obstacle after obstacle after obstacle, as Winston Churchill beautifully put it when he was asked to define success. He said it's going from one failure to another failure with no loss of enthusiasm. Indeed, these greats who changed our world never lost enthusiasm. They turned deaf to all of those naysayers and they said, we will do it, we shall do it. Steve Jobs in 1976 started Apple from his parents' garage when so many people told him, you'll never be able to achieve anything. Larry Page and Sergey Brin, the founders of Google, also rented a garage from a friend in September of 1998 to create a search engine. They faced so many impediments and obstacles, and today everyone knows who Google is. Here at CBT, we started our community also in a garage, in a guest house. And I remember those voices of people saying, what do you think you're doing? This is an impossible venture. Are you crazy? No one will ever support you. You want to have people and you want to have money. Yet we believed in Hashem's blessing to us. We believed in Hashem's blessing in us. And we turned deaf to all of those voices. And we continue to turn deaf to all of these voices that somehow a little bit from time to time still exist, to continue to grow our community into the force of nature that it has become and that will continue to be from strength to strength. Friends, today, as I speak, is Thursday, just before Friday, this Shabbat, and then Friday night, the Shabbat of this portion of Shelach. Today is the yahrzeit of Elie Wiesel, one of the famed Holocaust survivors of our generation, a Nobel laureate who illuminated and changed the world. Next week, on Wednesday night and Thursday, is the yahrzeit of perhaps one of the greatest giants of history, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson, of blessed memory, who continued to lead the Chabad movement with tremendous strength, conviction, and determination, and changed the landscape of Jewish history forever. I conclude with the story between these two great men, Elie Wiesel on the one hand and the Rebbe on the other hand. Elie Wiesel, after suffering at Auschwitz and then at Buchenwald, seeing most of his family perish, he came to visit just a few years later the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson, during a Farbrengen, a Hasidic gathering. He was escorted right next to the Rebbe. The Rebbe was saying L'chaim. They had a fascinating exchange. But during that conversation, Elie Wiesel turned to the Rebbe and said, Rebbe, give me a blessing, please, so that I can cry again. I've suffered so much that I have forgotten how to cry. My tears have dried up. The Rebbe said to him, I'll do something better for you. I won't teach you how to cry again, but I will teach you how to sing again. Singing will change your life and will change our world. The Rebbe gave him a special blessing, and Elie Wiesel went on singing and singing and singing the joy, the meaning, the power, the passion of Judaism and of his own soul during his entire life. Friends, this is what we need today most. We need to turn inwards, have faith in ourselves, turn a deaf ear, cheresh, to all of the no's, to all of the naysayers, to all of the negativities and all of the fears and insecurities, and learn how to sing that song of our soul once again. Its sweetness, the sweetness of its melody, will then no doubt reverberate in the world, change it, elevate it, and eventually bring about the world's ultimate redemption. May it happen speedily. Amen. Shabbat Shalom. מלאכי השרת, מלאכי